What's your problem? No, I mean the one your paper's about. Effective persuasion starts with a good problem. I mean, you're not going to persuade anyone to do anything if they're fine with the way things are. Why make a change if nothing's wrong? Well, they wouldn't. So one of the first steps in making a persuasive argument is to present a convincing problem. And that involves more than just telling your reader everything you know about a problem. Unfortunately, though, I see persuasive papers that spend about half of their page count, and sometimes even more, just describing a problem in a way that kind of feels like a waste of time, and that ends up undermining the effectiveness of the argument as a whole. So I wanted to show you how to set up a problem so that it sets up your solution, so that your writers aren't left sitting through something that feels like a purposeless dump of information. That way, your problem will have a purpose and your solution will feel inevitable. We've spoken before about how it's important to have a purpose in mind when you're writing. If your job is to persuade, then each part of your paper should be persuasive in some way. Unfortunately, though, I've seen a lot of writers take a different strategy with their papers. Often they'll begin with an introduction that gives a little bit of background on the topic and then concludes with an interesting thesis. Then they'll move on to spend pages and pages talking about everything they learned from their research about the problem they want to solve. Then, with whatever space they have left, they'll propose their solution and do an okay job of motivating readers to actually do it. Now, if you remember that our goal is to be persuasive at every step, you may notice that that second phase is mostly just informative in the way that it tells readers everything the writer knows about the problem. So, for example, a paper might be making the argument that we can address the poor mental health of college students by advertising mental health care resources more effectively. And in that paper, we get pages and pages that explain all of the negative effects that come to college students with poor mental health. Or we might get a paper that intends to influence people to carpool more often in order to fight climate change. And as part of that paper, we get a long explanation of all of the negative consequences of climate change. Or maybe somebody writes a paper that delivers a whole heap of information about all the ways that misusing social media can affect people's time management, self-perception, and social relationships in order to build an argument that parents can help their children to manage their social media more effectively. Now, like we said at the beginning, it is good practice to get your readers on board with a problem before you propose a solution. So I understand writers' impulse to explain their problems at length. But informing your audience is not persuasive work. It's just information. And information by itself just isn't motivating. The facts can't do that job by themselves. So just telling your readers everything you know about mental health or climate change or whatever else won't actually motivate them to do anything. It will just teach them some things. And if half or 2/3 of your paper is just informative, then you're not leaving yourself a lot of room to be persuasive. The good news, though, is that there are some things you can do to present your problems more persuasively so that they actually support your argument instead of just informing your audience. When you're writing an argument and doing research and all the rest, odds are that you'll start out with a broad topic that will lead you to a problem and an understanding of your audience as you develop a more specific solution that you hope will do something to make a difference. So presenting your paper as a solution to a broad problem makes a certain kind of sense. That is, after all, the process you used to develop your solution. But when it comes to writing, your job is not to present information in the way that you came upon it. It's to present an argument that will actually motivate your readers to do something. And that requires a more careful presentation of the problem. So, for example, if you want to do something about the mental health of college students, you might do a lot of research about the negative effects of poor mental health and all the statistics and consequences associated with it. And then, as you start looking for solutions to those problems, you might decide that you want to help college students to become more aware of mental health resources that are available to them by advertising those resources more effectively. Now, even though you started out by looking for a solution to college students' poor mental health, it's important to recognize that that's not actually what your paper is about anymore. Your paper is not solving the problem of poor mental health. The problem it's actually solving is that college students don't know where to get the help and support that they need. In that case, it's mostly a waste of space to talk about all of the ways that poor mental health can negatively affect college students. You can really deal with that effectively in a paragraph or two, or maybe even just in the introduction. The real issue is that students don't know where to go to get the help that they need. So you don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the percentage of students that are suffering from anxiety or depression. Instead, talk about the percentage of students who are seeking out help on campus, or talk about various programs at different campuses and the ways that students are or aren't made aware of them. Yes, your ultimate goal is still to support the mental health of college students, but your actual purpose in this paper is to deal with their lack of knowledge about where to get help. As your solution gets more practical and specific, your articulation of the problem should too. If you present your readers with the broad problem of mental health concerns and then offer the solution of advertising programs more, then they may be able to see how your problem and solution are associated, but it's a loose association at best, and it might not be very convincing. And that's because advertising just doesn't fix mental health. It addresses a lack of knowledge. So if you present the problem as a lack of knowledge, then your proposal of advertising becomes instantly more convincing and directly related to the problem at hand. And that will make it immeasurably more persuasive. Of course, when we're thinking about rhetoric, or any kind of writing, let's be honest, we're not going to get very far if we're not thinking about our audience. And that's especially important when we think about how we're going to present our problem to our readers. I'm sure we'd all like it if people would just care about things out of the goodness of their hearts. If someone is in trouble, anyone and everyone should just do whatever it takes to help the person in need. But reality falls short of that ideal. People have limited attention spans, time, resources, and energy. Sometimes the people you're trying to persuade just don't have the same investment in the issue that you do. In fact, odds are that they probably don't. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to write the paper in the first place. So it's worth taking time to present the problem in terms that resonate with your audience. Where does the issue hurt them? If they can see what's at stake for them, they'll immediately become much more invested in the solution that you hope to propose. And one of the most difficult topics in this respect tends to be climate change. I've read a lot of papers where writers go for pages and pages talking about average temperature increases, rising sea levels, changing weather patterns, and much more over the course of several decades. None of this is to say that these things can't and won't affect your audience, but remember, if your audience isn't on board, and they probably aren't, then these far-off and abstract consequences of climate change may be hard for them to understand and harder still for them to care about. When they're worried about how they're going to get groceries for dinner, pick up their kids from 3 different practices, and meet with clients all in the next 2 hours, they might not have a lot of room to worry about an average increase in temperature of 1 degree over several years. As catastrophic as that might sound to you, it's important to remember that it might not sound that urgent to your reader. So you'll need to find a way to present the problem so that it conveys that urgency to your audience. Maybe your reader feels the financial pain of an inefficient heating system and drafty windows. So instead of framing a home update as a cure for climate change, present it as a budgetary solution that also happens to support your climate change mission. Or maybe they live in a place where smog is a daily displeasure and an irritant to their sensitive lungs. So instead of framing your argument in terms of global climate change, you can motivate them in terms of the more immediate and visible benefits of taking the bus instead of driving their SUV all alone. And there are other options too, but the point is that readers often make 2 mistakes when they don't consider their audience carefully enough. The first is they assume that information by itself will be enough to get people to care. And I just don't think that's true. The number of things I know about is way larger than the number of things I care about, and I think that's probably true for most people. Just knowing about something is no guarantee that it will become a priority. And the second is assuming that the audience can and must care about the problem in the same way that you do. People can and often do care about the same issue for different reasons, so requiring your audience to care about your problem for the same reasons as you is unnecessarily rigid and actually pretty counterproductive. Would you love for all of your readers to be fixed with an uncompromising love for the natural world that motivates them to right every environmental wrong no matter what? Well, sure, but if they're willing to right environmental wrongs in order to save some money, is that so bad? The motivations might be different, but the outcome is exactly the same. So think about your audience when you present the problem that your argument aims to solve, and be sure to present that problem in a way that resonates with them. Because when you present an argument that only responds to your way of thinking, it probably won't go very far. Finally, when you present a problem, you'll want to present it in such a way that it sets up the solution that you're going to propose. In other words, don't just explain the problem, explain the conditions that your solution will have to address. And here's what I mean by that. If you're writing a paper about the many perils of unhealthy social media use for adolescents, you might just take the path that many writers do and list out all the negative consequences of social media use that you found in your research. And that's fine, but all of those negative effects of social media use do not necessarily set up the solution that you aim to propose, except in the sense that they explain some larger problem. That is, you're missing an opportunity when all you do is present a problem and then present a solution. Instead, you can use the problem to set up the solution by showing your readers all of the things that a solution would need to accomplish. You might think of it this way. In less effective papers, you might think of the paper being structured with two main boxes, the problem box and the solution box. In the problem box, we have a list of all the things that can go wrong when young people use social media in unhealthy ways. Once that box is full, the writer feels like they have done their job to get the audience on board, and of course by now we know better, and so they move on to the solution box. In the solution box, we get some kind of remedial action that the writer wants the audience to take with some sources to back up their proposal. The only reason we have to believe that the solution actually solves the problem is because they're in the same paper and the writer says so. But look what happens when we take another approach and instead use the problem to set up the solution. In this case, we present key aspects of the problem that need to be solved, and we explicitly state what a solution would need to do in order to solve the problem. For example, we might say that young social media users struggle with self-regulating their time on social media, and that knowledge tells us that an effective solution would have to address that inability to self-regulate. Then, look what we have in the solution, a discussion about how parents can help their kids to set limits on their social media use, and an explicit acknowledgement that this part of the solution addresses a key aspect of the problem. In this case, we get a problem that sets up the solution. By identifying the key requirements for a solution in the discussion of the problem, we make a much stronger and more necessary link between problem and solution. We're no longer presenting a solution that we hope will make a dent in a larger problem. Instead, we're presenting targeted interventions that will address key aspects of the issue. When we do that, we don't just hope that our readers will see how our proposal might solve a problem. Instead, we set up the necessary conditions for a solution, and then we show our readers how our proposal satisfies those conditions. That way, our readers will be able to see how we've thought through the problem, and they'll be persuaded that our proposal actually does something about it. Making a persuasive argument requires us to take advantage of every part of our paper. Why only have 55% of your paper supporting your purpose when 100% of it could be doing persuasive work? People are generally pretty good at presenting their proposals in persuasive ways. That is, after all, the most overt goal in persuasive writing. But they often fall short when it comes to presenting their problems as persuasively as they could. Luckily, that's an easy issue to fix as long as you remember to present the actual problem that your paper will solve in terms that resonates with your audience and in a way that sets up your eventual solution. The most boring papers are the ones that just go on for pages and pages about some broad problem without any clear solution in sight. By following these principles, though, you'll be able to write a paper that is not only more persuasive, but also more interesting. And that's a win if you're actually trying to persuade an audience, or even if you're just writing for school. Let me tell you, there are few crimes more heinous than boring your teacher. But anyway, that's all we've got for today. Let me know if you have any questions, or if there's something you'd like me to talk about in a future video. Either way, though, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll come back again soon.